Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So this is now our lesson after your research review panel um, title defense last held last last 2 weeks ago. So now we're recording our session to make it clear on what to do after the approval or modification, or sad to say, some rejection of your research title. So we're going to discuss what are the necessary do's and don'ts and the steps that you should be able to carry it out, and the next step after the RRP research title defense. Okay, so now let's have the following. Okay. So the outline, or of course, we're going to discuss the do's and don'ts after the RRP title defense, recap of the research process, which we have discussed in your orientation last time, the outline of the chapter 3, methodology, and the outline of chapter 2, which is already extensively discussed in previous sessions. But of course, we're going to recap it as there are some people who might already forgot the chapter 2 format, review of related literature. Okay, so let's proceed. So for the do's after the RRP title defense, you have to change or amend based on the RRP recommendation. If the recommendation is to proceed, you may do so, but you have to take change, or you have to make the amendments as per RRP recommendation. Now you are now here to proceed in crafting your chapter 3 and chapter 2. And always refer to the research title defense report for some clarifications or the weaknesses and strength of your paper. So if you are not asked to modify or change, you don't have to do so. Okay. Now, if your title defense or the title itself was rejected, you have to amend and you have to propose a new title. But this one you have to go to we have to, I mean, there's no time anymore, so you have to go and proceed now with your research paper defense already. Okay, so now to proceed. So the don'ts. After the RRP title defense, since the changes and amendments are based on the discussion or the discussion of the panel members, so you are not expected or you are not allowed basically to amend your paper on your own will or to the advice of your advisor. Okay, so any changes or amendment that is not advised by the RRP should be avoided. Now, especially, you just have to focus on our part, you have to focus on the changes and amendments that are suggested to you, especially by the RRP. Now, for any changes or amendments that are not covered or not been looked at by the RRP, you may do so. You might or might do so. However, affecting or running contrary to the logic or to the changes as proposed by the RRP should be avoided. Okay? So in general thought, if it's a changes amendment which is being suggested or recommended by the RRP, you have to do so. If it's a changes amendment not covered in the RRP, it's not mentioned or it's not covered, but you think that it will improve your paper as advised by your advisor or on your own volition, you may do so, provided that it will not affect the general context or thought or the logic of the paper as seen fit by the RRP. Okay? So that's our general rule. So basically, you cannot change your title at your own will. You cannot change your own research locale at your own will. And there are some any what you have offered to the RRP should be taken at face value, and the recommendation should be taken seriously. Next, okay, so let's have a recap of your proposed research title defense. So here's the step 1 and step 2. So basically, we're done with your step 1, step 2, or stage 1, stage 2. So we have already passed that to that level. Now we're going now to stage 3 and 4. So stage 3 and 4 is basically mutual exclusive steps or stage. You can do both stage 3 and stage 4 simultaneously without any problem. Okay? So basically, if you have the Gantt chart, you can do stage 4 and stage 3 simultaneously. So what are we going to do here? So basically, in your stage 3, which later will be explained to you, or there will be a separate video to discuss with the instrument development. You have to develop your survey or checklist. So you have two instrument of choice, either a survey or a checklist. What's the difference? A survey is later, of course, it's intended for us to solicit the response of our respondents or people. Now, checklist is, on the other hand, is an instrument that we use to qualify or quantify phenomenons or objects such as, for example, number of errors, cars, or other objects or things that could not respond to themselves. For example, you cannot simply ask a, a, a trash bin to answer a survey, right? So you use checklists. So basically, the checklist is being answered by the researcher. It's basing their answer on the experience of phenomena in that area. So that's the checklist. Now, commonly we use survey because we're used to, okay? So traditionally, there is a gear towards the use of survey, but again, checklist is also a valid instrument of choice. So checklist is a good instrument if properly done. Okay. So now we are going to develop your instrument. Either you can develop it your own, you built it in yourself, self-constructed questionnaires or checklists, or you have adopted a instrument based on a review or based on a research literature or expert. So in this stage, it's better for you to adopt an already established instrument rather than to construct your own because of the validation requirement. If you're going to adopt an instrument, you have to, of course, you have to validate it using 3 panel experts. So these are experts in tourism, 2 expert in tourism and 1 expert in psychology, or it could be 3 experts in tourism or 2 expert in psychology. So a combination. So if none, wala po makita, 3 experts of tourism. So experts in tourism means to say these are professor in tourism with a master's degree or a member of a research office or a practitioner in the industry, particularly covering market research or policy development. So these are the experts that we're talking here. And then finally, we're going to verify it if there will be time. Now, if you have adapted using already established instrument, there's no need for you to pilot test. So that's the good thing about it. If it's an instrument that you have constructed on your own, you have to test it and make a pilot testing and see to it that there is reliability of the instrument. Next, for stage 4. Stage 4 is not mutually exclusive, meaning to say you can do stage 4 while doing stage 3. Okay, so should not affect each other. Stage 4 is basically what we're going to do here is a methodology model, sampling procedure, etc. So basically later we're going to explain what is stage 4 research methodology design. And finally, the stage 5, which is you're going to be on your own doing your survey and checklist, field work. Okay. So in this way, we're going to, by this time, you should be able to pre-serve your letters to your research locale. Okay. Stage 6, tabulation of your data, interpretation, and then now be able to draw your chapter 5. 4 and 5 in this sense. Okay. And finally, you should be able to complete all the paper. So from starting from 3, 2, 4, 5, and 1, or a combination of 3, 4, 5, or sorry, 3, 4, sorry, a combination of 3, 2, 4, 1, 5, or either the last part will be 5 before 1 or 5 before 1. So whatever is the combination. So basically, the last part of it would be the chapter 5 or could be the chapter 1 because you're going to present all the details in chapter 1 ahead for us for the reader to be able to understand your paper, and the concluding remarks should be in chapter 5. Okay? Then after writing it, the manuscript, it will be presented now with your uh again with the RRP, or this time uh given you're now given the option to present your paper in other fora. So with a similar caliber or similar university status, or a qualification operated by CHED. So you mean to say your paper could be presented in other fora such as international symposium, or in other school or student research events of your choosing. So that is an alternative for those people or not who find research defense tedious, or materially they are not willing to do so. Next, after that, you have to bookbind it, and of course, attach all the approval sheets and the certificates. So including this, all of the letters. And then lastly, and then you have to condense your manuscript into a written research journal format. So again, just like your stage 3 and 4, this is mutually exclusive. So meaning to say you can create, or you can already done bookbinding while the other part of your team is doing the research journal format. Okay, so now let's proceed now with our methodology. Okay, so for the methodology, we're going to discuss the following: research designs, study population, sampling size and procedures, instrumentation, data gathering procedures, statistical treatment, or analysis and interpretation in case of qualitative research design. Okay, and ethical consideration. So let me just first clarify what is the research design. So basically in our class, we're going to have the following research design. So first is the recommended quantitative. Why quantitative? Because quantitative, quanti. Okay. Quantitative design, or quanti in other terms, is basically a research design. A research design. Okay. So basically, why quantitative is recommended to you, or it is prescribed to you? So again, quantitative is a type of research that makes use of numerical data. So when we say numerical data, these are data that you can subject in statistical treatment. So meaning to say, when you use quantitative type of research, you are using statistical treatment as your main entry. And likewise, if you're using the qualitative, you're using the analysis and interpretation. Okay, so that's the difference. So since most of us or most of you will prefer to use the quantitative method or quantitative research design, it is we're going to use the statistical treatment of data. Now, what is quantitative? Quantitative is one of the easiest methods in terms of classification of research design in terms of the type of data. Why? Because Datas are easily measured and could be treated with statistical treatment to test the inference. So quantitative data, the only difficult or it is characterized as a research method that is hard at gathering data. Mahirap kasi kumuha ng data. But the interpretation of data is relatively easier compared with qualitative. Qualitative, on the other hand, has its major advantage on the easiest, or I mean, it's the ease of collecting data. But the harder part here is the analysis and the interpretation of data because qualitative is non-numerical data, meaning to say these are opinions, general general facts, or let's say sentence which are unstructured or structured in certain format that you have to draw on inferences. So you have to facilitate the analysis to draw what is the general thought or emotion pertaining to that data. So in our sense, to expedite the process, since you are already a group, it's better to use quantitative. Now, if you're only one or two or three, since there is a limitation of your resources, qualitative is a better approach for you. So as to provide you with um better chance of completing your paper. Okay? So let's now proceed with our next. Aside from research design that captures the type of data they're going to use, such as qualitative data or quantitative data, we basically base our research. Research design can also be categorized according to the general stage of research towards a certain topic. For example, if the topic in your literature review is somewhat lacking or somewhat incoherent or rare, so that this type of research is what we call exploratory research, because exploratory research are research that we aim to rediscover or discover or expand our body of knowledge to certain areas of research that are not yet covered or tapped. So in this case, your research will be exploratory. So exploratory in a sense that you're still looking for things because there are no established or there's no prior research that have covered this type of topic. So that one is posing a challenger or a challenge for most of the newbies like you. So medyo challenging siya. Sabi nga nila baka ma-challenger ka dyan talaga. Of course, that's correct. Now, most of you would be subscribing to descriptive or correlational research. Descriptive is basically you're trying to describe a phenomenon. Okay? Descriptive. You're describing a phenomenon. You're measuring a phenomenon. So that is basically the goal of most of the papers here. For example, assessment, uh, assessment or evaluation. So these are a review. So these are descriptive because you're trying to describe a phenomenon or an issue. So in that sense, you're trying to gather data to describe the phenomenon. Now, another type of research that is common for you is correlational. You're trying to link up the effects or the impact of certain variable to one another. So most of your research will be correlational if you're going to have a predictor and a predicting variable or a predict or the cause or effect relationship. For example, um, uh, example would be, let's say, tourist predictor variable would be tourism marketing expenses. Predictor variable leads to tourist arrival. So meaning to say, the more we spend in, the more the government spends in tourism marketing expenses or expenditure, it creates more tourist arrival. So that the logic is because the conceptual framework of that research variable is that expenditures or marketing expense creates marketing program. Therefore, the marketing program attracts or communicates value of visiting the Philippines. Therefore, if there is an increase of tourist arrival, it will be associated or could be associated at the increased tourism marketing expenditure. So, ganun yung logic niya. However, there are certain variables that might disprove or disprove or enhances such relationship. Yun yung tinatawag natin sa sa ating research framework na intervening sa linking variables. So of course, if that's your type of research design, you have to minimize the intervening variables as well as the extraneous variables. So those factors that might pose an effect or effect to your research or to your predictor variable without really having it being covered in your paper. So, example, kasi 'di ba, marketing expense, if it's increasing, therefore tourist arrival should be increasing. So, meron din tayo kasi sinasabing ano 'di ba? For example, product new pro or let's say increase flight, 'di ba? Increased flight of certain airlines. So maaring yung increased flight of certain airlines, yung pala talaga yung nagpe-predict doon sa tourist arrival, not the marketing expenditure. So tinatawag natin siyang extraneous variables. So these are variables that are affecting the relationship but we're not measuring out. Parang ito talaga yung reason. So for that, we should avoid that. That's essential in your methodology. Okay. So now, another one is, of course, we have causal design, multi-factor analysis, but you forgot it. Huwag nyo na po i-cover yan because that is difficult. Okay. So you concentrate more of the three. We have exploratory. For some, I think we will have one in Santa Ana, or then for most of you, that will be descriptive, assessment, evaluation, review. Example ng descriptive is, for example, the impact of a certain program or the effects of, of or let's say the the impact of, or let's say the description or parang a study about the waste management practices of certain barangay. So yung mga ganun. So that will be because you're not correlating or you're not identifying the cause and effect relationship, but merely you just want to observe and describe why things happen. So ganun lang naman siya descriptive. Now, if it's correlational, you're trying to link up, you're trying to built in a model that showcased that this factor could be used as a predictor of certain effects. Okay, for example nga, yung previous example ko, marketing expenses increase, therefore tourist arrival should increase. However, yun na medyo ano natin na ingatan because there are extraneous variables that might affect the validity of your research. So you have to check with it. No? Baka mamaya meron palang ganun. Hindi nyo nasama. So error na kagad yung paper nyo. Okay. Now for the study population, okay, other types of research design, you can use also with your instrument, survey or non-survey design. So basically, could be survey or experimental or quasi-experimental. Now, for most cases, that will be survey research. Okay, so ano po ilalagay namin sa service research design? Okay, simple lang. Pwede nyo po ilagay dito ay kung anong data, quantity or qualitative. Let's say qualitative or quantitative descriptive, diba? Or descriptive research design. Qualitative, quantitative, descriptive, or correlational kasi pag sinabi mo correlational, automatic, ano na yun? quantitative. So there's no need for you to indicate quantitative. Let's say exploratory, lagyan nyo siya quantitative exploratory research design. So pwede yung ganun. Okay? So again, the only exception here is the correlational because correlational are commonly done using quantitative. Now, if you want to use qualitative correlational, you have to specify it. Qualitative correlational. Pero rare yan. So rare. Okay? So next. We are now on the study population. So we're now study population kung ano yung pinag-aaralan natin. So now what is our study population? Now your research population is basically what you're trying to what is you're trying to research about. So this is the concern group of people, objects, or data or phenomenon that you're trying to look at. Now, most of your paper will focus on people or yun nga, tinatawag natin respondents or participants. So, pag sinabi natin respondents, magre-response lang. So, hindi nyo sila kailangang isama dun sa experiment or hindi nyo kailangan sila isama dun sa study nyo. So, for most terms, that is called research respondents or respondents kasi magre-response lang. Now, if you're the group of Santa Ana that we ask them to, okay, ilan yung kamag-anak mo, perhaps you can bring them or you can ask them to join your research and then go to Santa Ana and evaluate the Santa Ana because in Santa Ana, there's no tourists. So they now become a participants kasi there is an active participation. Kaya participant siya. Respondents, nag-response lang. Okay, ano siya, passive. Nag-respond lang sila based on their previous behavior, previous experience. Now, in your research population, pwede rin siya maging objects such as cars, trash, or basura. So, ito pwede maging research population siya. Or pwede rin po maging events. Example, number of defect. Okay. Sa isang production line, ilan ang defective, that will be your research population. Number of effective or defective versus past goods in a production line. So that the event is of course a defect event. Okay? So ganun po yung ating research. Now, your research population again will be divided into two types. It could be an finite or infinite. For finite, we have the standard mean of error. And of course, you will see now the difference. So what's the difference of finite versus infinite? Pag finite, alam mo na kagad kung ano yung number. You will easily get it. For example, the population of certain barangay, your school population, that's finite because it's already fixed. Hindi siya pwedeng gumalaw. Now, infinite, for example, would be the number of stars, hindi natin alam. Pwede siyang magbago any moment because depending on how we count it. Pwede rin po yung finite number natin. It's open loop population. For example, it's a population that people may come and go as they please. Or basically, there's no statistics that we could rely on. So that would be a finite population. Okay? So for that, we will use different standard error of mean. So this is the mean or the SD for our computation. So it's very critical for us to identify whether your population is finite or infinite. Okay. So as I perceive it in your research presentation, most of you have identified that's finite. Now for some of you, let's say katulad nga ng Santa Ana, katulad ng ibang participants of certain program, wala pala silang statistics or expected people or participants. So medyo nagiging finite siya. Okay? So pag finite, you have to medyo mahirap computing yung sampling size because we rely on comparative. So magko-compare tayo. So we have a technique for that later on. Okay, next. So your types of research population. So in your you have your research population, which is your target population. So this is your research population actually, target population. So other term for your research population is your target population. This is basically the general population that you seek to understand. For example, let's say COVID vaccine. So what is my target population? Everyone. So except cancer patients, except for HIV patients, except for elderlies, let's say 80 and above, and except for infants and children below 5 years old, because these are populations that are not covered in any research because of certain physiological, immunological, and uh, chronological issues. So basically, if you're uh, a human being, both gender, your age is 6 years old and above, but not exceeding 80 years old, you don't have any issues in terms of immunology, you are now part of the target population. So that is your research population for the COVID vaccine. However, not everyone are willing to participate, and there are some issues. Now, for example, we would like to participate, however there are some certain countries that ban certain drugs or certain vaccine. So this is what we call source population. So saan manggagaling yung population mo? Example, in our case, the study that is conducted for the what we call the Pfizer vaccines are mainly source out to US and Canada, as well as in Europe and Japan. So these are the source population natin. So basically, dito manggagaling yung source ng sampling. However, not everyone in Japan, US, Canada, and Europe were involved. So basically, there are small subset or subsample or members of population that were sampled. So this is what we call the sample population. Okay? So now, hindi naman lahat nung nagkaroon ng opportunity mabakunahan ng meron silang chance magpabakuna, nagpabakuna. Again, di ba, may mga tao tumatanggi. So this is what we call the study population. Yung mga taong pasok at nag-participate, yun po yung aaralin natin, study population. So mean to say, from our research population na malaki, kailangan lang natin kumuha ng study population. Kasi, bakit? Number one, ito yung reason. Yung target population mo kasi or research population mo is basically if you're operating in a logic that a few could predict the general mean of the target population. Mean to say, kailangan mo lang kumuha ng representative for us to mimic or to assess the general tendency of the target population. Parang democracy, di ba? Sa democracy, sino ba yung mga dapat bumoto? So these are people who have legal age, not deprived of liberty, or they don't have cases, and they are Filipino citizens. So yung target population mo, lahat dapat bumoto. However, there are some issues that we are going, or it's better not to consult the general population. Example kasi, for example, if we're going to select a president, so paano mo siya pipiliin? Are we going to have an election which covers the target population or research population mo? Lahat, di ba? So, syempre, may excluded pa rin dyan. Kasi nga, kaya nga siya tinawag na target. Kasi yun lang yung aaral mo o yun lang covered mo. Now, research population mean to say these are only the population that is included to your research. In this case, your election. 'Di ba? Kasi kung edad mo 17 and below, hindi ka pwedeng bumoto. Kung ikaw ay may kaso or nasampahan ka ng any electoral or election or criminal offense, hindi ka rin pwedeng bumoto. Kung hindi ka Filipino citizen, hindi ka rin pwedeng bumoto, 'di ba? At for example, 'di ba? Excluded ka. Kaya nga siya target population. May target ka. Now, let's say, boboto tayo ng presidente or let's say we're looking for a president. So, lahat ng tao, sa target population na yan, we would try our best to achieve uh, response or solicit their answer. So basically, kaya nga po siya tinatawag na election. So mag-elect tayo. Or basically, they will respond using a ballot or a survey instrument called balota or ballot as their instrument to assess the general pulse of the target population. And by consensus, we're going to select our president. So that's how your target population works. Paano ganun siya? Ang tawag po doon ay census. Sinesensus na po natin siya lahat. Okay? Census because we're trying to cover all of the population. Okay? So, census. So, sinesensus mo, ang election ay census yan. So, sinesensus mo lahat para makapag-elect ka ng president, senate, vice president, senator, etc. However, there are some issues, for example, legislations, batas. Let's say, magpapasa ng anti-divorce bill or SOC-G. Kailangan bang gawing election siya or via plebiscite? Hindi. Because we have our sample population. Saan galing sir yung sample population? Remember our Congress. Your Congress is selected among your congressional districts. So, di ba, remember the lower house or the House of Representative? Each congressman represents a certain congressional district. So, parang siya nagiging sample mo. So, basically, we are assuming that under democracy, your congressman is representing the people and its will. And the Congress is basically the reflection or the sample size of the target population or the research population. However, we know the truth. Okay, medyo naiba. Okay. So, that's the logic of democracy. However, syempre nga, hindi naman natin maiwasan may bias dyan, di ba? Nagkakaroon tayo ng bias. Okay. Anyway, so again, the logic is still holds true for majority of the issues. Okay. Ganun po yung ginagawa natin. Bakit hindi natin tanongin na lang yung population if sang-ayon sila o hindi? Or are they favor or not? Because again, it's costly, not efficient, and time-consuming. Baka matagalan tayo sa pagboto. Kasi imagine niyo lahat ng legislation, absent tayo sa trabaho para lang bumoto. Baka wala na, or sa mga work natin, or sa mga klase ninyo, baka wala na tayong gawin kundi bumoto na lang, di ba? So that's why we designate our congressman as our sample size or our representative to the Congress. So ganun po yung trabaho nila. It represents our will. Okay? So that is sample size. Now, sir, paano po ba natin kukumputing yung sample size and procedure? First, we have to define the population. Ano ba yung nahanap nyo? It's finite or infinite? Now, hopefully it's finite kasi madaling compute. Next, sampling frame. So, pag sinabi mo sampling frame, what's the qualification of your respondents, participants, or your research, or your what we call the samples population mo? Ano yung hinahanap mo sa sample population na yan? Okay? So if you're looking for the sample population, normally we have the basic requirement. Legal age, kasi hindi ka pwede magpa-survey if it's not legal age. Number 2, if they're willing or they are voluntarily offering their data kasi Privacy Act. And of course, if they're tourist, visitor, what you know the difference. Pag tourist, paano nyo define? Diba? Pag visitor, meron din tayong definition. Pag excursionist, meron din tayong definition. So you have to follow the UNWTO definition. Okay? So that is our sampling framework. Okay? So for some, are you going to consider visitors na first time? Or are you going to consider visitors na at least dapat twice siya nakapunta? There are some questions regarding that. Okay? So that is basically your sampling framework or your respondents parameter or what we call sampling qualifications. Qualifications ng nahanap mong sasagot or magpa-participate sa study. Next, determine the sampling method. So may mga sampling method tayo later. Okay? Kasi your sampling method will impact your sample size depending on the technique or the method you have used. And last but not the least, of course, determining the sample size and collection of data and analysis of data. Okay, next. So how would we know if we're going to use or how much is our sample size? Okay. So again, 'di ba, going back to our previous study, previous slides, ang hinahanap natin po is study population. Ilan po ba included sa study natin na members of the research population? So dapat members po sila ng research population ha, members. Kasi baka mamaya gusto mo tourist, tapos ginawa mo, sinama mo sa study population mo, mga visitors lang, or let's say mga local residents, eh mali na po yun. So may contamination. So dapat members po sila ng research population, ha? Research population. So dapat member po sila ng inaaral yung population. Okay? So if it's a local, local lang. Hindi pwedeng may tourist. Okay? Pag tourist, tourist lang. Pag visitors, pwede naman yung tourists as visitors, pwede rin naman yung excursions visitors. Mas generic kasi siya. Pero dapat clear tayo. Okay? Now let's go now with our procedure. So you have your population under study. Let's say pipiliin ko tao. Anong klaseng tao siya? So what's my parameters? Again, legal age, tapos nakapunta na doon sa lugar na ini-study ko, gusto sumagot, willing sumagot, what else? Yun lang. So pwede na yun ha. So nakapunta siya. Ang pinaka-criteria ko kailangan nakapunta siya. That is my qualification. So question, are we going to use population, a census, or sample, or survey? If it's a census or survey, okay, or checklist or sampling, alamin natin paano. Okay, example, if you're studying PLM graduates, okay, ng ating program na tourism management, question, ilan ba sila? 100 plus lang. So kung 100 plus lang siya, hindi mo na kailangan mag-sampling technique at kung ano pang gagawin mo. Diretso ka na sa census. So therefore, wala ka nang gagawing sampling size computation. Yun na siya. Let's say it's 175. So yun na ilalagay mo, 175 na. Wala ka na idadagdag, wala ka na ima-minus. Yun na siya. Okay. So pwede mo naman siya i-present per year, di ba? 2021, 22, 23. That's your total population would be, let's say 235. That's your sample size already, the ideal sample size. But of course, you have to discuss later on yung response rate niya kasi at least dapat may response rate ka na 80%. Okay? 80% for census. Okay? 80%. Now, if your study is not of the similar matter, let's say your study would involve people of thousands or hundreds. Now, next question is, what sampling technique I'm going to do? I'm going to do probabilistic ba or non-probabilistic? So, paano ko malalaman kung probabilistic ba siya or non-probabilistic? Simple lang, napakadali. Number one, alam mo ba kung may number ka? For example, is your research population finite or infinite? Diba? Kasi kung hindi siya finite, hindi mo alam yung number. Let's say, yung mga tao na pupunta sa Quiapo, hindi natin alam kung gaano karami pupunta sa tao sa Quiapo because there is no statistics that counts the number of in and out going to the Quiapo or to the plaza. Right? So that is most likely finite, or sorry, infinite. So if infinite siya at wala tayong statistics, we're going to get the sampling size, ideal sampling size, by mimicking or by estimation. Okay. Paano estimation? Okay. E-estimate mo. For example, um, in a daytime, gaano karaming nakukuhang tao sa, let's say, dun sa pinaka-plaza ng simbahan or kahit sa simbahan na mismo. Let's say, we assume that the major focus of the people there is the simbahan, not other shopping area or the transportation hub there. Simbahan na lang. So, estimate mo na lang. Ilan ba yung seating capacity ng simbahan? Pagpalagay mo, 1,000. Ilan yung misang ginagala per day? Pagpalagay mo, 4 times. So, 4,000 na siya, di ba? So, ngayon, 4,000 siya. So, that is the total capacity ng church. So, most likely, you can have down the working variables on how to estimate the crowd size of the area. So, parang ganun siya. Estimation talaga mangyayari sa inyo. Kasi, um, infinite yung number eh. So, you're going to have an estimation of of the size. Second approach would, or the alternative approach is to relatively compare it. Example, let's say you would want to know the population of respondents visiting, let's say, a mall. Let's say, Robinson's Mall. Ngayon, ang management hindi siya nagka-count. Pero normally, they would count the entry and exit of people. So, let's say, pagpalagay natin hindi nagka-count. So, since Robinson's Mall is, let's say, is comparative the same size, same layout, and same number of stalls with SM Manila, you can have a comparative samples using SM Manila as your relative sample size basis. So, for example, sa sample size sa SM Manila, dahil parehas naman sila ng sukat, parehas naman yung number ng store, at parehas naman siya ng number ng floors. So, you will use SM Manila as your basis to determine the sample size of your Robinson's Place, Ermita, or Malate, di ba? So, ganun ang mangyayari doon. So, you can have the estimation approach or you can have the comparative estimate approach. Okay? So, pinaka-normally ginagamit dyan is the estimation approach kasi most cases kasi hindi mo siya mako-compare. Example, how would you compare the arrival of Philippine Arena with other arena here, 'di ba? Napakalaki ng Philippine Arena. So hindi mo pwedeng compare 'yan with other um, events place or venue. So medyo mahirap kasi mag-compare, relative lang siya, okay? So that's how we do it. Now, of course, the general thumb of that, if we're talking about thousands, your sample size should be 400 and above kasi rule of the greater number. Now, if your sample population, or let's say your population is around 1,000 below 100, so the general rule here is to get 100 participants. Okay? So, yun po yung pinaka-clear summary niyan. If your population is concerning thousands, 400 yan and above. If your population is less than 1,000 and below, so 100, yun ang ating general rule. Okay? So, pwede tayo maging non-probabilistic using that kasi syempre, ang hirap naman paano natin siya gagawin. So, pwede tayo mag-convenience. Yan. Convenience kung ano yung pinakamadali. Purposive. Quota, snowball. Ang pinaka maganda dito is I think is convenience. Siyempre pinakamadaling gawin 'yan, 'di ba? Purposive kasi may purpose ka. For example, gusto mo intervene lang puro babae, gusto mo intervene puro lalaki. Pwede 'yon. Quota, katulad ng ginagawa ko kanina, yung third option niya, 'di ba? Kanina may estimates ka, kanina meron kang relative comparison. Ang pinakamadali, yung pangatlo kong suggestion sa inyo, pag hindi nyo alam yung, yung size ng research population nyo, You use 400 above if 1,000, 100 if it's 1,000 and below. Okay? So that is what we call quota sampling. Kasi kung hindi mo talaga alam, feeling mo naman, hindi naman siya abot ng more than 1,000, mag-quota sampling ka. Katulad ng sinasuggest ko kanina. Pag 1,000 and below, 100. If it's 1,000 and above, 400. Diba? Ganun siya. Or pwede rin naman snowball if sampling. Snowball sampling yan is, for example, nagtanong ka, tapos meron po ba kayong kilala na gumagamit ng produkto nyo rin po? Or may gumagamit po ba ng produkto na ganito? I-refer ka yung parang in-interview mo, magtatanong ka kung sino po pwedeng interviewin, tapos tanong ka ng tanong hanggang sa dumami siya. Okay, snowball. Okay, pero ito yung pinaka-complicated dyan, snowball. Okay? Pinakamadali, quota sampling, saka convenience talaga. Okay. So, yun po siya, ha? Now, pag finite po tayo, or infinite, or infinite, or finite, sa infinite, kaya mo siyang e-estimate or compare relative. Pwede tayong gumamit ng probabilistic sampling technique. Ano ba yung advantage kasi nitong probabilistic na to versus dito? Bakit si sir mas gusto nitong probabilistic? Okay. Mas mag-accurate kasi yung probabilistic kasi number one, you give equal sample or random to the population. Therefore, yung result mo dito is more representative of the research population. Therefore, mas mataas ang chance siya mag-represent or makapag-generalize ng conclusion mo that will apply to the research population. Yun kasi yung pinaglalaban natin dito. Remember again yung ating example kanina na our sample mean represents the general idea or it represents the will or the behavior of the research population. Kung non-probabilistic ka, medyo may bias yan. Meaning to say, you might uh, you might encounter more respondents that are outliers, or meaning to say they are representative, or they are representing more of a minority idea rather than majority, because there is no random chance of being selected from, diba? So that is the difficulties, or that is the weakness of non-probabilistic sampling. Kasi let's say, if our Congress or our congressman is elected only if, katulad dati, if a congressman or representative should only be elected from a male and educated, patay na, di ba? So, yung mga babae, wala silang representation sa Congress. Paano naman yung mga hindi nakapag-aral? Hindi, wala rin silang representation sa Congress. Kung if let's say, college graduate lang pwede tumakbo, patay na, di ba? So, magiging non-probabilistic na siya. Hindi na siya yung representative. Representative pa rin siya in a way, pero hindi siya yung representative ng research population mo. Di ba? Kasi nga may bias siya. Okay? So, yun po yung na-avoid natin dito. Pero may mga studies kasi nga tulad nung kanina, yung sa ating college graduate sa college natin. Hindi mo na kailangan kasi gumawa ng ano, yun na yun, census kasi siya. So talagang representative na siya, okay? Hindi mo kailangan problemahin ang sarili mo sa ganito kasi yun na siya. Para siyang eleksyon, okay? Talagang kukunin mo yung will of the people, majority, lahat sila halos kukunin mo. Now, for this one, let's say, kung kukunin ko lang is, let's say, mga apelido nag-start from A to M, how about yung N to Z? Diba? Wala silang chance. So, maaring lahat ng matatalino nasa A to M or lahat ng mga hindi pinagpala nasa A to M. Diba? So, maaring generally yung class IQ average niya mababa because of that non-probabilistic sampling technique na ginawa mo. Okay? So, maaring ganun siya. So, kaya hindi siya ganun ka-advisable. Pag probabilistic sampling kasi, you can generalize. Okay? So, that's the advantage. Generalize. Okay? You can have a generalization, and our mean or our sample responses is more reflective of the general will or tendency of the research population. So that's the beauty of probabilistic sampling technique. So paano? You can have the simple random technique by identifying how much or what is the sample size using our formula later on. Or you can have the systematic random sampling, stratified sampling, or complex sampling. So, ang ginawa kasi nung isang group, let's say yung barangay waste management program, since they're concerned about Ilog Pasig, so the only household that are selected in their study are located along the river pathways mismo. So that is what we call that is a systematic random sampling because they already include people that are living near to the river. Okay? Kasi sa barangay na yon, hindi naman lahat ng tao sa barangay na yon nakatira malapit dun sa ilog. So, in-include lang nila talaga yung mga household na malapit dun sa ilog, which is good because that is more valid because their study is about waste management practice towards yung Ilog Pasig. So parang that is a good idea to do. So very good sila doon. It's a good sampling technique. Now there are some cases naman sa Manila Zoo, parang simple random lang talaga siya. They were going to get the number of visitor, estimate number of visitor, and then they're going to conduct survey. So pwede sila mag-survey ng weekdays, weekends. So of course, it's a simple random sampling, 'di ba? So lahat may chance. Pero yung organization, wala. Or they can do the stratified sampling. Let's say, mag-allocate sila. Gawin natin parang ganito. Sa PLM tayo. Ilan ba yung colleges natin? Let's say we have 12 colleges. And bawat colleges, meron tayong representative relative to their population. Meaning to say, let's say, the largest college of the PLM would be CBM or College of Business Management and College of Engineering. Okay? So, yung malalaking college na yun. So, therefore, mas maraming kang respondents sa CBM sa College of Engineering because they hold majority of seats or majority of population of students in PLM. Now, in case of the College of Tourism, Hospitality Management, hindi naman tayo ganun kalaki, hindi rin naman tayo ganun kaliit. So therefore, our sample size coming from our college will be reflected to the number of or the percentage that we hold to or the percentage of the size of our population in respect to the PLM student total population. Okay? So ganun na gagawin natin. Okay? So complex sampling, wag na yan. Mahirap pa yan. Next. Instrumentation. So basically, what do you mean by instrumentation? So again, your instrument could be a survey, in most cases, survey siya, or checklist. Paano checklist, sir? Okay. Again, katulad ng sinabi ko doon sa meron siyang visual obstruction or visual pollution. Pwede kasi silang gumamit ng checklist. So, ilista nila doon yung mga visual pollutions per area na designated nila. Actually, pwedeng sila mismo ang maging assessor, di ba? So, halimbawa, for example, ganito, no? Ito kasi survey, kaya natin ito intindihan, gets na yan. Yung checklist kasi medyo bagong konsepto sa atin. Okay? So, for example, nagpapatest na tayo, test the assessment. Di ba assessment siya? Hindi na may bibigay sa iyo survey tapos after nun meron ka ng certificate, di ba? Hindi ganon. Ang gagawin doon is you have to perform a features relating to your qualification. Let's say qualification is food and beverage. Your qualification is tour guiding. May checklist yung assessor. And from the checklist, it's competent, not yet competent. Checkan niya yun. And based on the checklist, he will assess whether you are qualified for that qualification, whether you are competent or not. So basically, who is the respondents, or who is the research population there? The research population is basically all professionals or human resources who intends to work in, let's say, food and beverage, or in our case, tour guiding. Lahat yan. Now, who is your study population? Yung study population mo is the one who are applying for that particular batch. 10 lang yan, diba? 10 lang yung respondents mo doon. So ngayon, paano mo siya i-assess? Checklist. That's your instrument. Okay? So that is the validation of your checklist as an instrument for research. Ngayon, ano ginawa mo as researcher? Ikaw yung nag-validate or may assessor, di ba? Tapos yung sample size mo, nagpa-perform sa'yo. Diba? Ganun siya. So pwedeng ganun na yung researcher, siya yung sumasagot ng checklist. Or meron silang yung hire na assessor, siya yung sasagot ng checklist. Okay? Pag survey kasi, tinatanong mo yung opinion ng tao. Okay. So, ganun yung magkaiba po yung checklist sa survey, ha? Now, ang pinaka-importante dito is you have to explain to us what is the theoretical basis of your research construct or variable. Pag sinabi mong construct, pag variable kasi, madali na siya explain. For example, what is variable? Variable are, let's say, gender. So gender could be male, female, or masculine, or feminine, diba? Or male, female, LGBTQ, or asexual, etc. So pwede siyang gender. And construct, good example, gender is a construct. Okay. Sex is a variable. Paano yun? Variable. Pag sinabi mo variable, hindi mo na kailangan gumawa pa ng measurement dyan. Madali nyo na siyang ma-measure. Bakit? Kasi sex, ano ba yung sex natin? Male or female lang, diba? Dalawa lang. Pag construct, gender is construct because aside from physiological, may psychosocial para siya, no? Na dimension. Example, you can categorize your respondents according to gender, male, female, LGTB, asexual, mga ganun, di ba? Indifferent, yung mga ganyan. So, pwedeng meron kang theoretical basis dyan. So, according to the theory of Hertzmerz, ganun, blah, blah, blah. So, yun siya. Another example that could be used in our field is variable. Ano bang variable natin madaling gamitin? Variable, let's say, satisfaction. Variable yon. Now, pag nilagyan mo siya ng tourist satisfaction, that is construct. So for short, pag kailangan mo ng other measurement or kailangan mo ng mga measurement para i-measure yung idea na yon, that is construct. Pag variable, madali na siya makita, di ba? So anyway, in our research, it's treated construct and variable of the same parlance. So hindi nyo naman siya madalas makitang dinidifferentiate. So dito lang. So basta ang point lang dito is, if you're asking for visitor satisfaction, how could we measure visitor satisfaction? What's your theoretical basis based on your RRL, diba? So how would you measure it? You ask yourself these two questions. How could I measure it? And how would I know it? Diba? So paano mo malalaman kung may visitor satisfaction? So malalaman mo siya pag ganito. Therefore, kaya mo siya i-measure dahil alam mo. Okay? So that's your theoretical basis. So let's say you are measuring the effectiveness of certain programs. So how would you measure effectiveness? Diba? Yun ang pinaka deadling tanong. Kaya nga dapat sa RRL or sa research review of related literature, meron po kayong area dyan na how to measure your research variables or research construct. Okay? Next, you have to include the description of the survey checklist. For example, part 1, The survey or the checklist involves the following parts. For the survey, there will be a letter soliciting the purpose, intention, the use of the data, etc. Part 1 talks about the qualification of the respondents. We will determine whether the respondents is qualified or legible to answer the survey. If not, the survey will not be, or the survey response will be disregarded or will not be included in the research. Part 2, survey about visitor satisfaction. Part 3 is a survey about the siguro second variable mo. Let's say visitor repeat business or visitor loyalty, 'di ba? For example, you have two variables here. Visitor satisfaction and visitor loyalty. Your research variable is that visitor satisfaction leads to visitor loyalty. So part 1 is basically demographics and qualifier questions. Part 2 is about visitor satisfaction. Part 3 is visitor loyalty. So that's it. And then your measurement of scale, you are going to use either ordinal, nominal, or Likert. So you have to indicate this. And your interpretation of that. Let's say the interpretation of your instrumentation, let's say response from 5 to 4.33 is very satisfactory, etc., etc., etc. So ganun siya. Okay? Next. Okay, recap lang. Basically, alam naman natin to review of related literature, no? So, if you remember it, so just going to get my so your thematics should be laid down. So, combine na po yung ating foreign, local. So, we're going to just identify them into your reference, no? So, sa reference yun, nakahiwala yung local sa foreign. And then your synthesis table will be now in a narrative format. And then your for research framework, you just choose whether it's theoretical or conceptual. Again, if it's a theoretical, it's based on theory. If it's conceptual, it's based on different theories that you have combined, integrated, or used. Pag theoretical, single theory lang siya. One theory, which is the main theory of your paper. Conceptual, you have used different theories to explain your approach to your problem because you find there's no satisfactory or there's no satisfying theory that best explain the phenomenon. So basically you have created your own. No? So next. Of course, your research paradigm should be included. Okay, so these are the useful links. So as promised to you, how would I compute for my sample size? So meron naman po tayong videos on how to do that, but the easiest for you is to use the Rao-Soft formula. Okay, so let's go with our Rao-Soft. So just going to share. So for example, I'm going to go with the class GIS. So let's say may mga online naman na formula. So you can use this one. So let's say the sample size is around 1,000, let's say 10,000 or 200,000. Degree of error expected is 5%. Sample size would be 133.33. Now show working. So, copy nyo to, yan na i-present nyo. Lagay nyo po sa sample natin. So, now, our formula would be Yamane or Tamane formula. That's our base. It's not the Slobent formula. So, this sample size is it's a good one. So, pwede yan. Okay? So, nakalagay naman siya. I-share ko link. Or, you can use the other one, Rao-Soft. Yung isama. Okay din tong Rao-Soft. Let me just check it. Say, ito pala. Nandito pala. Sorry. Nandito rin pala. Okay, rouse off. So let's say your sample size okay. So what's your margin of error? That's 5 and confidence level is 95. Okay. Sample size, let's say your sample size is now around roughly 3,400 tourists. So what is the response distribution? Response distribution basically, uh, so you have, okay, you just have to leave 50 if you don't know, no. So it talks about the bell curve and then enter the information, then it will reply to you. Recommended sample size. Ah, saan ba natin? Done. Okay. Oops, nawala. Okay. But this one is good. Ito na lang. Okay. So para mas easy siya. Parang di ba nakita niyo naman kanina. So the link will be shared to you para madali niyo siya makompute. So what's the basis of this one? So the basis would be what we call the Yamane formula. Yamane. Okay. Sample size. Again, paano po yung sample size na to? So this is applied probabilistic. Probabilistic pag non-probabilistic, wala kayong computin. Pag census po, wala rin po kayong computin. Leave it as is. Lagay nyo lang census siya. For your case naman na non-probabilistic ka, lagay mo lang bakit. You have to explain bakit. So based on the RL, you have to explain. Now, if you're probabilistic, this is a sample formula for you. Yamane. Yamane. And to compute it, you can use this website. Yan. Nakita nyo naman, di ba? So, yun lang siya. Now, sir, paano kung ang data ko, yes or no lang sagot? Or approve, disapprove. Okay. So, may mga ganun tayong case. Kasi yung Yamane kasi, it's a category, it's a uh, liker type or ano siya eh, more than two yung possible responses mo. So if it's let's say two lang or dichotomous response, gagamit ka ng Cochrane formula. So this is the Cochrane formula. Now again, you can use the internet to compute for the Cochrane formula automatically, just like what I did here. Now, for the RAWSOP, mukhang hindi gumagana yung RAWSOP ko dahil mahina ang internet. So, you can also use RAWSOP or G-Power for some cases. Now, this one is a good class GIS. That's a good computation. So, let's say, Cochrane naman tayo. Hanapin natin kung nandito siya. Again, repeat ko lang po, this is good for probabilistic. Pero if you're going to have the census, no need for this. If you're going to have the non-probabilistic, so malamang di niyan pwede ito. Diba? Wala naman tayong pwedeng gawin sa ganyan eh. Ay, wala. Wala pala. Okay. So, sorry. You can answer statistician for this one. Okay. Now, to show you naman what's the approach for writing your paper. Ito naman siya, no? Share natin. So, share ko lang. Guys, sa documents. Okay. So remember guys, 'di ba? Ano na tayo, no? Tapos na tayo sa research defense. So ang kailangan niyo na lang po gawin is of course, hindi niyo na po kailangan i-revise yung concept papers nyo. No need for that because you are now instructed to go with your manuscript. Diretso na kayo sa manuscript. Huwag niyo na i-revise yan. Sayang sa oras niyo yan. So sa manuscript natin, so basically sa manggagaling yung lalagay niyo sa manuscript. Manggagaling siya for your concept papers. So basically sa concept paper siya. Nakita niyo itong research population for study. So ito po yung lilipat niyo sa samples, research sample or samples or ano ba yung term ko doon? Study sample size or wait lang. The term is ano ba yung term na ginamit ko? Nabubulol ako. Study population. So, lilipat niyo siya sa study population. Okay? So, sa research concept paper natin, nakalagay siya as research population. So, lilipat niyo siya sa methodology as your study population. But this time, you have to define that as your as the ano na no. So, lipat niyo lang siya. You might include the computation for that. So, tapos, syempre, di-determine naman po dun sa sample size yan later. So, dito, nilagay ko po yung qualification ng mga sample sa study ko. So, historical, cultural, geographical, existing, touristic value. Because these are not people. These are not, these are sites. So, I have to illustrate kung ano siya. And then, of course, nilagay ko dito yung number ng sites. No? So, in my case, number sites, tapos yung sources of the information. Okay? Then next, you have to do the related literature review. So for the related literature review, it should be thematic. So the name of the theme, ito yung name ng theme niya, and then a section that introduce it or discuss about what's the foregoing. For example, this section examine the current blah blah blah. And then the narrative format, narrative po ang gawin nyo para kayo nagkukwento. Narrative. Paano po ba mag-narrative? Parang sinasummarize yung sinasabi. Tapos if there's interesting contrast, you can compare it, no? And then at the last part of the theme, meron kayong summary or synthesis ng mga nangyari or mga pinagsasabi niyo sa task. Ganun din po dito, state of the DDR. Tapos section, ganun. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. Tapos, this one, yung synthesis ninyo, diba kasi sa research concept paper niyo, the synthesis table, no? Synthesis table kasi ang gamit natin. This one, synthesis na. Narrative format yun na siya i-present. Okay? So, paano? For example, the synthesis, so a current Philippine organization approach to blah blah, pa-identify nyo. Tapos, at the end of the day, what you realize? I realize, or the researcher have identified that there is an absence of protection for culture, blah 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 blah. Therefore, that will blah 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 that needs for the rise of the study to improve or to include uh, cultural heritage site into national develop or national disaster risk, blah 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 blah. So lagay niyo siya dyan. So that is the purpose why we have gaps, strength, and weaknesses. Okay? Parang sinisynthesize niya siya for us to forgo it. Okay? And then pasok niyo na ngayon dyan kung anong theoretical ba siya, conceptual, okay, anong research paradigm nyo, and then your drawing. And then, wala na to. That's chapter 3. Okay. Chapter 3 na tayo. So, chapter 3 nyo, ganun din. So, meron kayong, di ba, for example, research design. Research design, basically, ito siya. And then, konting introduction. And then, my approach. Kasi, huwag nyo pong gayahin to because this is a mixed method siya. So, meron akong mixed method approach dito. So, qualitative, quantitative. So, mixed approach siya. Okay, nakalagay mixed method approach. Okay, so huwag niyo pong ganyan. For your cases kasi, most likely it's qualitative, descriptive, or correlational research, or sa case ni Santa Ana na magpapadala ng mga kamag-anak doon, it's more of quantitative exploratory research. Yan po yung term natin. Okay? Ganun lang po. Okay, so I think mukhang yung iba kasi kinopya talaga, di ba? Huwag niyo pong copy. Wala kayong mapapala dito kasi iba naman yung research niya sa research ko. Okay? So, and then you have to indicate the local reference and the international reference. Nalalagay po natin siya dyan. Okay, so thank you very much. Okay, and hopefully you can do it now. So, alam kong bumabagyo pero that's it. Part of life. Thank you.